Hey guys, I'm back with another short video. This one hopefully won't be as long as some of the other ones, but I want to talk a little bit more about trade stuff real quick. Also, I apologize for the appearance. Struggle's real. I'm sure it is with some of you guys as well. Dominic's keeping me busy, so this is actually being filmed about 9 o'clock at night. Excuse me, in the classroom, so I apologize. I haven't shaved and all that, but whatever. All right, so a couple things real quick on free trade and just on trade in general. Excuse me. So first off, I want to talk just real briefly about the types of trade organizations that we have. There's really four main types of groups that countries can enter into with regard to trade, basically to trade agreements, trade pacts, however you want to say this. Trade organizations. There's really four main types here. The first one, and the simplest, is what we call an FTA, which is just a free trade agreement. Okay, a free trade agreement, or sometimes a free trade area. You'll hear this called a free trade area. All this it's the simplest thing where we're saying, hey, there's no restrictions, there's no issues within this little free trade area. We're going to trade with anybody in any situation, any way possible, help each other out. Pretty basic, okay? So an FTA, a free trade area, or free trade agreement, that one's pretty straightforward. Second one, a little bit more complicated, and that is a customs union. Okay, so a customs union is basically one in which there are mandatory tariffs on non-members. Mandatory tariffs on non-members. So the concept here on a customs union is a country or a group of countries are basically saying we want to encourage trade within the borders of this agreement, and we want to discourage trade outside of these few countries. Okay, that's the whole concept with a customs union. Is if you're in, you're part of the clique. Okay, you're good. No tariffs, nothing like that. We're all good. We're going to free trade within this area. But if you agree to this, you got to put tariffs on anybody that is outside of this particular area. Now, there's always a couple of exceptions to the rule. The U.S. is engaged in a number of different trade agreements, and we are usually exempted from this whole tariffs on non-members. That basically, if we have a trade agreement, like as an example, okay, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This was one in which it was supposed to line up as a customs union that it would be us, Canada, Mexico, a couple of Central American nations, where essentially we would be part of this, and okay, tariffs on non-members. Except the U.S., we didn't get held to that because we have partnerships with so many different countries, and because we have so much of the world's wealth, everyone normally kind of goes, we'll just waive that part of the deal for the U.S. because we want access to the U.S. consumer base. One of the few that has not been willing to sort of waive that is China. Part of that probably goes to the fact that the Chinese government controlled for a long time so much of the U.S. debt. Not so much now, but for years and years they did. So for the most part, we kind of get exempted from this. Okay, third type here that we've got is an economic union. And an economic union is one in which we share factors of production. So the best example of this would be the European Union. And so it kind of works out. We go EU, okay? Economic Union, the European Union, because there you've got a whole group of countries that are able to share labor. If you're working in one country but you're a citizen of another one, totally fine. They're willing to share each other's labor, share some of those factors of production without any sort of restrictions in place. So that's an economic union. And then lastly, we've got a monetary union. And a monetary union is one in which the countries share the same currency. Okay, so they share the same currency. Now that's kind of an interesting one because the EU is a monetary union in part. So most of the countries in the EU are on the euro. They are on the same currency, but not all of them. Not all of the countries that are part of the EU are using the euro. So that's a little bit of a weird one, but that would be an example here again of a monetary union. Um, the U.S., as far as examples of these different ones, the U.S. is involved in a lot of different trade areas, a lot of different trade agreements. NAFTA, which I mentioned. There's also CONCAF is one. There's CAFTA, which is the Central American Free Trade Agreement. There is FTAA, which is Free Trade Agreement of the Americas. There's one, I think it's APEC, not to be confused with OPEC. That's the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperative, that even though we're neither Asian nor Pacific, we're still involved in that. So there's a number of different ones that the U.S. is involved in. So it's always difficult to say, is the U.S. in favor of free trade? Are we in favor of protectionism? I would say probably over the last 20 to 30 years, we've been much more of a free trade nation. We're getting a little more protectionist now. And going back to the 80s and 70s, we were a little more protectionist. At this point, I think we tend to be more free trade. However, there's been some changes over the last 3 or 4 years to that as well. Hopefully this makes sense. If not, drop me a line in the comments or just email me. Hope to see you all real soon.